It's excited to see everybody. I'm excited to see new faces, excited to see old faces. I just thank you for coming out. I am a little nervous. I haven't public spoken since college. But I'm very excited. I'm excited with what God's doing in the past couple years, what he's been showing me, and just to share part of my story with you. I used to think I didn't belong. My name is Kelly Yvonne Johnson Bonecheech Whipple Teresi. I was not planned. In 1976, a young woman found herself pregnant with me. She made an appointment to have an abortion at Planned Parenthood. The morning of the procedure, she was in the parking lot. She decided last minute, for some inexplicable reason, not to go through with the abortion. She chose life for me, but my birth was not part of her plan. And note that as I share my personal story, everyone that I share with you is never to dishonor. Everyone has their own personal story. Everyone has their story to tell. And I'm telling my story, but the people who were involved are part of this. But it's never to dishonor anybody. I was not planned and I was not wanted. I was reminded often I was a mistake. Not only was I not wanted and unplanned, I was also left behind and given up by many men. Multiple fathers adopted me, but to be adopted, the prior father has to relinquish their rights to you. Every man that gave me his last name in adoption left. I didn't belong. Each time I was given up to the next man, I made an agreement after each father left that fathers are not reliable and they're not to be trusted with your heart. And I felt disposable. I have 4 last names, 4 social security cards, and 3 birth certificates. They all have the same first and middle name, but they all have different last names. I was adopted and given up by 3 dads before the age of 13. Each of my social security cards has the same number, but a different last name. Growing up, the question on my mind was who did I belong to? I was a member. Was I a member of the Johnson family, the Bonecheech family, or was I a Whipple? Through my healing, I have learned that the way a father interacts with his daughter is the way that she sees her relationship with God. My earthly dad taught me that daughters were disposable and burdened and easily forgotten about. A backstory: I was not raised in a Christian home, far from it. There was quite a bit of tension in our family over Christianity, the church, and God. I knew there was a God in heaven, but as I watched a lot of Saturday morning cartoons, I thought he was kind of up in heaven, casting down lightning bolts, and had a really long beard. So that was really, I was not raised in the church. Little did I know then the deep love that my Heavenly Father had, and the protection that he had over my life. There's so many dark times. I've come to realize only in the past few years that there is a God that has always loved me, has always wanted me, and has been pursuing me since I've been a little girl. He tells me I'm lovable just the way I am, and I'm deserving of fatherly love, and that I'm worth fighting for. Here's what I knew. I knew I was unwanted, I knew I was unlovable, and I knew I was a burden. And I wedged these truths deep in my little girl heart. The truth made me feel unworthy of any man's love. Only the past 2 years has Jesus really begun to reveal himself to me, and I've been able to uncover the vows and agreements that I made, not even knowing that I was making them as a little girl. My good friend Lindsay actually invited me for the first time about 1.5 years ago to Be Still, and Rachel and the whole Be Still team has been a pivotal point in my walk with Jesus, and learning about a Jesus I never knew. As I said before, my mom found herself at a young age pregnant and was forced to marry my biological father, Bruce Johnson, which was pretty common at that time. I was born in March. I was Kelly Yvonne Johnson for 1 year. I have his mannerisms, my eye shape, my color, my stature, facial responses are all very similar to my father's. My appearance, and so growing up, I had a lot of comments from my mom that I reminded her constantly of him. And so as a little girl, not knowing, and I knew I was a Johnson, but I wasn't because I had different last names, it was really difficult in my identity. When I was 1 year old, they divorced. I grew up with a second adoptive dad. I was always around my Johnson family because 2 brothers, my mom and her sister married my dad and his brother. So it made double cousins. And quite often throughout our life, we lived with them in and out. And so they were Johnsons. They would go see the Johnson family. Occasionally I was invited. But as a little girl with a new father and a new last name, I wasn't a Johnson anymore. But I was by birth. but I was not legally anymore. So I knew I didn't belong in that family. By blood, I was a Johnson, but marriage and adoption, I was removed and excluded by having the Johnson family name. And I didn't have a choice in this. Like I mentioned, I didn't keep the Johnson name very long. But the Johnson last name is a really important part of my story, just because it's my identity, biologically, because I am a Johnson biologically. When I was 2, my mom married the Boncic dad, spelled Boncich. It's Croatian, so that was a fun last name in elementary school. So the Johnson dad chose to relinquish his rights to me as his daughter, so that the Boncic dad could legally adopt me. At 2 years old, I became Kelly Yvonne Boncic. I got a new social security card and a new birth certificate. It said that dad was at the birth of it actually says who was at the birth, and it says that dad was at the birth.
What?
Yeah. I was too young to understand this, but I've questioned this particular transaction most of my life because of the age I was and how long they were married. How could a father give up his rights to his daughter? Did he not love me? Why didn't he fight for partial custody or at least visitation rights? And didn't I belong? I was a Johnson. I was left as a little girl asking what I could have done to make him love me. How I could have been so unlovable he gave up his rights to even see me on a regular basis. I only saw him once every few years, and it wasn't until I became an adult I had a choice to see him more often. I did see him. He died about 8 years ago, and he did get to meet 2 of his grandkids, but it really never went beyond that. My little eyes were always watching, and my little ears were always listening. And their divorce left a deep scar on my heart. I'm now 10 years old. I have 2 last names, and my mom's in a relationship with an airline pilot. They didn't get married, but between the age of 10 and 12 is pretty pivotal for a girl, just in the adolescent years. So he was the father figure that I had. He never had kids of his own, so his time was limited and awkward with me. During this time, I was still Kelly Yvonne Boncic. And this was a particular devastating time, because in this time, my mom, she wasn't married to this pilot, but the Boncic dad, the second dad, would come and actually pick up my sister. I'll tell you in a minute. Hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. So after 2 years, the airline pilot left our family, and I made an agreement again. I was a little older, not to trust men. It wasn't worth it. I didn't belong to him, and I sure wasn't worth fighting for. I was without a dad again. Now 13, I'm in 8th grade, and my mom met a man through a dating magazine. 3 weeks later, they were married.
Oh.
The marriage lasted 13 years, ending in another divorce. But within the first year of their marriage, I found myself in a courtroom. I was pretty naive as a 13-year-old, not realizing that I did have a choice. I didn't realize I had a choice, but I didn't have a choice to say to the judge, I want to not be his child anymore, I want to be his child. Because they practiced with me at home what I needed to say, and I didn't realize. Within the first year, I'm in front of the judge saying that I wanted this man to adopt me. That day I gave up the Boncic last name and became Kelly Yvonne Whipple, which is my maiden name. What was most hurtful at that time, I think as a 13-year-old, is that the Boncic dad chose to relinquish his rights to me, but he didn't to my sister. She was a legal Boncic. So I thought I was his little girl. I knew I wasn't biologically a Boncic, but kind of from the age of 2 to 10, that was my dad. And he's the only dad I ever called daddy. There's nobody else I ever referenced that. In the Boncic marriage, they had my sister when I was 4. She was a biological Boncic. She looked like her ethnic dad, and she belonged. The Boncic dad did not give up his rights to her, to the Whipple dad, to the third dad. She stayed his daughter. I was a pawn in a relationship, yet again. So in the courtroom, accepting the man's last name for the 3rd time, I had thoughts that plagued me most of my adult life. And again, I'm not a Christian at this point. Why was my sister not asking for a new dad? She was allowed to stay a Boncic. Why wasn't she telling the judge that she didn't want her particular dad any longer? And why did he give up his rights only to me? And it wasn't to my sister. I concluded that she was more lovable than I was, and she was worth fighting for. I didn't belong in the Boncic family anymore. Yet again, another man tossed me aside and gave up on me, and let another dad deal with me. The new Whipple dad walked into a marriage with my mom, her past, and 2 teenage girls. He never had children of his own and was from the South. We lived in California at the time, born and raised in California. So he came with very Southern values, which was not great in what we were raised in. So it was difficult from the beginning. I was born and raised in California with a very liberal mom, very loose rules and very little structure. The man was fighting an uphill battle in the marriage from the very beginning. As an older teen, I knew how to put them against each other, and I did, because it was a fun game. And it was out of rebellion, and I was resentful of all my last names. It was difficult to explain to people why my sister was a different last name and I wasn't, or why I have double cousins, but I wasn't a Johnson anymore. I was 26 when they divorced. They were married 13 years. And this dad and I never saw eye to eye. The last time I saw him, I was 8 months pregnant with my firstborn child 16 years ago. So, again, I still didn't know God at this point. I was not, this was about high school. I was a little girl growing up with a broken heart, just wanting someone to love and fight for me. I really just wanted to belong to anything or anyone. It was a very difficult journey. John Eldredge is a current Christian author of Wild at Heart, and he says, the true story of every person in this world is not the story you see, the external story. Mm-hmm. The true story of each person is the journey of his or her heart, and caring for your own hearts isn't selfishness, it's how we begin to love. Mm-hmm. I didn't know my heart needing tending, I didn't realize it needed tending to while growing up. That was just my life. I didn't have an option. But having children can reveal a lot about the condition of your heart. So, my heart was wounded, lacking the love of a father and the deep need for acceptance. I've just started a journey to care for my own heart, continuing to search for a deep love as Jesus and God allow, as I'm allowing them to be in my heart. It's amazing what they're doing. So back to the story. I'm 14 years old in high school. I don't have a very good relationship with the Whipple dad at all. And I was in high school, started noticing young men around me. I was at the age where I realized as an adult, that I was trying to get some answers as a 14-year-old. Was I lovable? Was I worth it? And was I worth fighting for? So I met a handsome young man at band camp my freshman year, and I did play the flute. He was tall, dark, and handsome, as much as a 16-year-old with a 90s mullet and black glasses could be. I had my first date in the movies with him and my first kiss. He was my first boyfriend. He was my first real relationship. And I put my heart in his hands as a young, naive 14-year-old would do. After a few months, he broke up with me and crushed my heart. I was devastated, and again learned that men can't be trusted. And I wasn't worth fighting for. The Southern Whipple dad came, and I wasn't allowed to date till I was 16, and that I was 14 at the time. So this boyfriend broke up with me. Immediately after this relationship ended, I jumped into another relationship with a young student man, I guess 1 year older than me. We dated and he pursued me. About 5 years we dated. We experienced intimacy for the first time. I gave my heart in an attempt to figure out what I could do to keep him around. After 5 years of dating and our first year in college, he had lied for months, left me for my best friend, and they got married. So for the first time, I experienced betrayal from a close friend of an opposite sex, as well as a father figure, or a boyfriend type. The deep betrayal and loss reinforced the fact I was not worth fighting for, and that obviously not lovable by all men, and now betrayed by female friends. Later that year, after the betrayal and the breakup, I found my 19-year-old self, I was 19 now, on the doorstep of a 21-year-old man. With my friend who liked him, she wanted to go see him. He opened the door, and it was the young man, my first boyfriend. I was in college trying to find my way in the world, and standing in front of me is my first boyfriend. He helped me write this next part. This young man did not have his life in order. He was a bit chaotic in his finances and quite the free spirit. He was bold, brash, and arrogant. But he proved to be the first man that fought hard for my heart. His name's Jay Teresi, and it was in the shelter of this relationship that for the first time I was able to pursue my own identity. While dating Jay in California, I was in a liberal college in the Bay Area in California, and very far from being a Christian. For the first time in my life, I had the opportunity to see a mental health counselor. That was never an option. It was just never offered or talked about, or it was actually a weakness in our family if you needed to see someone. As I was navigating the large world around me, trying to find answers where I fit in, I began a journey of discovering who I was. This counselor is the first of many in my life that has helped me to figure out the multiple pieces of the puzzle. At least just trying to get the frame of the puzzle. So I was on a journey to find what normal looked like. So, of course, I majored in psychology. While in college, one of my psychology classes had a research paper. I wanted to do research on women, last names, and personal identity. I knew men didn't change their last names after marriage. We had some family members who did not take on different last names when they got married, so it wasn't a standard operating order in our family. But I wanted to know that if men didn't change, why did women have to? I also wanted to know if women changed their names, did they have an identity issue with leaving their last name and taking on a new last name? Wow. And I really wanted to know if they still felt like they belonged to their original family, their family of origin. I discovered there had not been much research done on the topic. And as a young 20-year-old student, I was quite surprised by there was really no professional research done at all. So then I questioned, well, why wasn't there research? I was thinking, well, so then you think, am I on the wrong topic? Is this something nobody else deals with? Was it not an issue for other people? I even remember my professor being surprised at the topic I wanted to research. I got an A on the paper because there wasn't any research, so I wrote my personal story, that's actually what has begun a lot of what I'm still doing. I still hadn't been introduced to Christ, but our move to Texas a few years later changed all that. After 5 years of dating Jay, I was 24. We got married in California in a garden in 2001. It was my dream wedding and a major step. It was a real big deal for me to commit to marriage, given the experience with divorce I had in our family, as well as the betrayal of the 5-year relationship. Jay and I have been married 18 years, together 24, and had our first kiss and date 28 years ago. We have 4 kids. We have a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14 and 16, 2 boys and 2 girls. He works for Home Depot. And we've moved from California, stopped in Texas for 3 kids, and then we've been in Atlanta for the past 10 years. Yeah. Gathered a few. When we got married, I became Kelly Yvonne Teresi. This was the first last name I had a choice in. I finally belonged, and I was a Teresi. His parents are amazing and absolutely accepting all these years. I couldn't have asked for better in-laws. After 2 years of marriage, moved from California to Texas. And having just become a family with the birth of our first boy, I thought the right thing to do was to go to church because we were in the South. So we found a cowboy church. I had no idea. I was a senior in high school and I realized Jesus was the Son of God. Wow. It was a very big revelation. Had no idea Old New Testament. I didn't even know the Bible was split in 2. I had no idea characters, anything going on in the Bible. So my husband jumped on board with his Bible knowledge. He was raised Catholic, but in high school he became an atheist. And that's really how, when we dated, that's kind of the type of relationship we had. He likes to explain that it's kind of like we're in a movie theater and someone doesn't understand the plot line, and there's someone whispering like, what's going on, what's going on. That's what I was doing in church services. And so he decided to go back into the Bible. And in doing that, got him back into the Bible, which got him reconnected. And after 7 years of marriage, moving to Texas, 4 years into our church journey, I accepted Christ, and we were baptized together in 2008. So yeah. Looking back now, knowing the love of God now, I realized I was wanted from the very beginning. I've come to realize God's hand protected me in my mother's womb. He had a plan that spared my life. I have been set aside for a greater work, as all of you have as well. I have a destiny. I have an identity as an adopted child in God's kingdom. Galatians 4:5 says, "Yet all this was so he would redeem and set free all those held hostage to the written law, so that we would receive our freedom and full legal adoption as his children." Yeah. So an adoption, again, another adoption, but a good one. So, I am chosen. I am wanted, and I am worth fighting for, and so are each of you. As I learn more about the nature of God and continue to have more encounters with Jesus and listen for the promptings of the Holy Spirit, I'm reminded daily of whose I am. I do belong, and I am the daughter of the King. I am cherished and valued above all else. God is a devoted Father that stays, and he'll never give up. He'll never abandon you. He is loyal and will fight on your behalf. He can be trusted with our hearts. He has arms to hold us like no other. His love never fails, and he wants every one of us to belong in his family. God offers to take our deep hurt, our sense of abandonment, as his burden. We are commanded to forgive those in our life who've hurt and wronged us. When we choose to forgive, we find that there's space in our hearts that wasn't available. We find that forgiveness is the key to unlocking the protected and valuable areas of our heart that God wants to occupy and fill with his goodness. I just completed a training on freedom prayer in Nashville last month. And even with 20 years of professional counseling, and all that I continue to still learn, this training reiterated the condition of my own heart and the constant need to continually forgive those who didn't protect my heart. I want to share just a few really important truths in hopes that this is something you can take. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it's a choice. Forgiving someone does not excuse their wrongdoing. Forgiving does not give them the right to continue harming you. Forgiveness does not forget about what happened. And forgiveness is a choice to break free from past hurts. It's a decision to relinquish your rights for vengeance. It's one way to break ourselves free. Forgiveness is one way to break ourselves free from the hold someone has had or has on our life. Unforgiveness can block you from the freedom God is wanting for you. A couple Bible verses from the Passion Translation on forgiveness. There's quite a few, actually, when I looked up forgiveness. Matthew 6:12, forgive us the wrongs we've done as we ourselves release forgiveness to those who have wronged us. Colossians 3:13, tolerate the weakness of those in the family of faith, forgiving one another in the same way you've been graciously forgiven by Jesus Christ. If you find fault with someone, release the same gift of forgiveness to them. Matthew 6:12, and when you pray, make sure you forgive the faults of others, so your Father in heaven will forgive you. Matthew 18, this one I've reminded daily. Matthew 18:21. Later, Peter approached Jesus and said, how many times do I have to forgive my fellow believer who keeps offending me? 7 times? Jesus says, no. Not 7 times, Peter, but 70 times 7. So I share this information on forgiveness because it's been a huge revelation, a huge freeing aspect in my life. And it wasn't until last year that I started learning about my own unforgiveness and the harm that unforgiveness can do in our hearts. It can block us from freedom, and I was tired of carrying a heavy heart. Some of the following are symptoms of not forgiving someone. Constantly rehearsing an argument in your mind. Avoiding certain people, feeling powerless, and carrying a sense of victimhood everywhere I went. The first one's really important for me, constantly rehearsing arguments in my mind, because I did that often. Either a conversation I had that I wanted to win, or a conversation I was going to have that I was going to win. And I realize now I have to forgive. I have to stop the conversation. Forgiveness of others is important, but so is forgiving ourselves for what we have chosen to do, and forgiving God for not showing up the way you thought he should have. Many nights of the week at the dinner table, we'll have prayer time. We'll do something at dinner, or we'll have prayer time in one of the kids' rooms, and we ask our kids for one person. We try and do this almost every day. One person they need to forgive that day. I want them to learn the power of forgiveness at a young age so they can do it daily. They can do it 3-5 times a day if they need to. And it could be as simple as someone cutting in line in front of them at school, or not letting them play Fortnite for 4 hours. There's times they've had to forgive me because I have not let them play Fortnite. And their friends were waiting. But as we continue to do this activity, they're becoming aware of the power that other people's impressions and actions, so forth, have on them, that they can just release if they need to. So we're trying to just get them quick to do it constantly. It's a constant. I see things in pictures sometimes, and I just want to share an illustration that helps me understand unforgiveness. I see it as a weed sitting in dirt, and there's a dirt line with the roots hidden below the surface. Counseling and talking to friends can cut the weed at the root, and you don't see it. And it appears to be gone, and you feel that you have relief for some time. But then something triggers anger or sadness or envy. Why? Because the roots are below the surface. And the enemy doesn't want us to know that they're there. The hidden roots are pathways the enemy uses to torment us with negative thoughts that are not from God. He wants to convince us we're not good enough, we're not worthy enough, and we're not worth fighting for. It keeps us from belonging in God's family because we believe and feel unworthy and not good enough. They're lies. Having done deliverance last year with Nancy, who's here, also known as Inner Healing, the process showed me many weeds and roots that I still had in my heart, and I had no idea. Weeds can form, grow, and take root from things like unforgiveness, from lies, trauma, sin, generational sin, and even witchcraft. With the guidance of a spiritual mentor and Jesus, you can uncover the whole weed with its roots. And one thing I thought is this wet outside, when you pull a weed, I get so frustrated when it snaps. And you're like, oh, the root is still inside. But when it's just a little wet and perfect, the whole thing comes out. And anyway, that was just so sad. I was able to dig deep and start clearing my heart from all the weeds that had taken over. Only then was God able to start showing me his truth and start his work. I've attempted to clean the weeds out of my heart for many years, didn't realize the depths that many of the roots had taken. And new weeds that pop up over time. As I forgave people, God took the weeds and roots and in exchange gave me good gifts. It was a sense of acceptance, a vision of my inheritance, deep truths, and the ability to experience love and freedom and joy. The gifts from your Heavenly Father are uncomparable to what the world can try and offer you. He is waiting to take your weeds in exchange for something so much better. Forgiveness starts with a choice. It's a hard step, but freedom is waiting. You may have to forgive the same person repeatedly. It may be years you forgive someone repeatedly. I still do, and the conversations between Peter and Jesus, the 70 times 7, constantly comes back in my mind. But each time you forgive, it loosens the chains gripped around your heart. There are things that have happened to us, and things that unknowingly we've chosen that have created weeds and roots. And forgiveness does not change the past, but it certainly has the power to change your future. Unforgiveness hurts you more than the other person. Unforgiveness hardens your heart. It fills your mind with anger, bitterness, and revenge. Unforgiveness gives the enemy a stronghold in your life and uses those small unseen roots below the surface to whisper in your most vulnerable moments that you're not enough, you're not lovable, and you're not worth fighting for. I'm much quicker now to realize the demonic drive-by thoughts. That's the freedom prayer had referenced that. As they pop up, I'm quick to forgive again and ask God for truth in exchange. The more I find healing through forgiveness, the more I thank God for the ways he's pursued me all these years. I've needed to forgive every man who has played a role in my life for not being the father that they should have been, forgive them for not fighting for my heart, and forgive them for abandoning me. The powerful gift of forgiveness has released my heart to God, and he's shown me I can trust him. I do belong, and I know who I belong to now. Romans 8:15, you did not receive the spirit of religious duty, leading you back to the fear of never being good enough, but you have received the spirit of full acceptance, enfolding you into the family of God, and you will never feel orphaned, for he rises up within us, our spirit joins him, saying the words of tender affection, beloved Father. I used to think that I didn't belong. My name is Kelly Yvonne Johnson Bonecheech Whipple Teresi, and this is just a part of my story.
First of all, I know this beautiful woman really well over here, and the fact that I even just get to share my story alongside hers tonight is just, wow. I mean, God, only God could do that in his goodness. And so I'm going to share as well, and I got a lot to share with you guys. So my name is Lindsay, if I didn't already mention that, and today was interesting. As I was praying about just sharing and coming tonight, I actually had to run to Kohl's today, and I had an Amazon exchange, which I don't know, I love that I can exchange, like return Amazon stuff now at Kohl's. Anyways, I was praying and I'm running to Kohl's this morning, and as I'm coming out from returning some, shoes for my son that didn't fit, I see a woman walking towards me who is bald. And she's walking towards me from the parking lot. Now, if you had asked me 8 years ago if seeing someone bald going through treatment would have affected me, I would have said no. I would have just kept on walking, got in my car. But today, seeing that woman, and I mean this happened today, I saw myself in her face. I saw my own battle with cancer, and I knew what she was facing. And that just made time stop today. And so I stopped her like a stalker would. And that's what you do when you see a beautiful bald woman. And I asked her, are you in treatment? Are you battling? And she immediately started crying, you guys, immediately. And so right there in the parking lot, I was able to share my story, that you're going to hear tonight. And I just told her, I said, you're going to win this battle. And I asked her if I could pray. And right there in the Kohl's parking lot, heaven came down. And so really my whole goal in sharing my story tonight is exactly that. It's like, that's what I pray for, that it can just be used. I can't be there for everyone who is hurting, but God, in his goodness, connected two people, not randomly, today, in the same path. And if we are willing, we get to help each other. That's the best part. We get to shed some light, pray, and then God showers down his power. And the greatest power is to know that we're not alone in what we're walking through. So I thought that was pretty cool that happened this morning leading into tonight. And I just felt like God was like, I got you for tonight, Lindsay, I've got you. So there are actually a lot of different parts of my story. And I'm going to, do my best. Like I said, I am slightly nervous and there is a lot. So I am going to read because I want to be mindful of time. But what I felt led to share tonight is really about God's goodness as I battled cancer. My desire is to shed light on one of the hardest battles I have ever faced, and how God's goodness was chasing me down in the midst of that. So 10 years ago, just a little backstory, we were living in Michigan, where I had been born and raised. Again, just to recap, my name's Lindsay, my husband is Nate, and we had, at that time, 10 years ago, 3 kids, Paige, Luke, and Emery. And during this time, my kids were all little, under the age of 5. And I was 32. From the time I had my son Luke and then into giving birth to Emery, my youngest, I was constantly sick. And I battled severe seasonal depression. Most of the time I would just blow it off and just blame it on having little kids and being exhausted. And also the weather in Michigan did not help that because we rarely see the sun. And so what ended up happening was eventually we started really feeling like we needed to make a move. And so we started praying about moving, and at the time, my husband's sister lived in North Carolina, so we just kept thinking, we're gonna go to North Carolina, that's where we're gonna end up. She had kids, our kids' ages, that was our plan. So finally, after years of praying, my husband's job transferred him to Woodstock, Georgia. This opportunity opens up, and we had never heard of Woodstock. But we knew God was opening a door, and I was like, I'm ready to get out of Michigan, so let's go. During the move, I wasn't feeling well again. I kept having flu-like symptoms that would come and go, and so I went in to see my doctor. This was 2 days before the moving trucks were coming, and he knew our family well. And I will never forget that day. He called me later that evening, and he said, I can hear his voice on the phone. He just said, Lindsay, it looks like cancer. It looks like lymphoma. And honestly, I have a nursing degree, but in that moment, it was just like, I don't know what you're saying right now. This is just, I can't even process this. I was immediately, that night, admitted into the hospital. And tests that normally take weeks to schedule were all performed in a blur over days. All this happened 2 days before, again, the moving trucks were scheduled to arrive for our move to Georgia. After tons of tests, I remember being wheeled out of a PET scan, which is the testing they do to basically stage the type of cancer that you have. And the doctor looked at my husband and gave him the news that the cancer was everywhere. It was stage 4, metastasized all throughout my body. They read the results right there. They could see it in my bone marrow and everywhere. So many amazing things took place over the course of the next 2 weeks. I don't have time to go into all of it. And if you want to know more, you can come and find me for sure. And if you're battling illness, please come and find me. But one thing in particular was right after this happened, a friend and mentor shared with me that she believed my cancer was spiritually rooted. She referred me to a book by Henry Wright. It's called A More Excellent Way. It was a book that I was familiar with, and in the book, Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is the type of cancer I was diagnosed with, is related to having an emotionally absent father figure in your life. When she shared this with me, it was a truth that hit me in my heart. As I will share, I had dealt with many years of counseling, forgiveness to deal with issues I'd faced with my dad and our relationship. After she shared this with me, we had a mini come to Jesus prayer session in my living room, and I out loud began to confess a lot of things I had never exposed before. Anger, bitterness, and hurt in my heart towards my dad. I said things I felt wrong saying that night, but I knew that they were the root of what was making me sick. Along with that night, the following Sunday at our church, our pastor, all the leaders, and the entire church anointed me with oil and laid hands on me. And you guys, I still, even in writing my story, I think back to that. We were in such chaos during that time. So just knowing how God intervened through that church body, knowing that they knew what to do, it was a powerful moment, one I will never forget. And scripture actually gives us a format for how to pray for the sick. In James 5:13 through 16, it says, "Are there any believers that are sick among you? Then ask the elders of the church to come and pray over the sick and anoint them with oil in the name of our Lord. And the prayer of faith will heal the sick, and the Lord will raise them up. And if they have committed sins, they will be forgiven." At that point, that was all I had. I was given not a great prognosis. So I know that after that day, in my living room and in my church, with the prayer of faith, was the day that my healing began. 2 days later, you guys, I was called by my oncologist, and he informed me that there was a mistake that had been made, and the cancer was not everywhere in my body. It was only stage 2. It was contained to my upper abdomen area. The day that we received that phone call, I knew God had performed a miracle. And I still continued with treatment, and I walked out a very hard season of chemo over the next 6 months. But as I walked out the hard, God was doing a deep work in my heart. This season of battling began my journey to deal with the deep-rooted cause of why I was facing cancer. And honestly, Kelly's story goes right along with my story. You guys, I did not deal with those roots. And so I was now facing cancer. I would ask God, why do I have this cancer? My relationship with my father from childhood had not been good. My father was present physically, but emotionally, he had always been absent. And financially, he had only provided for me with the bare minimums. I can remember in my mind thinking, I can't dream because my dad and his lack has stifled my dreams. I felt suffocated under knowing that he was content with very little, just the bare minimum. And I was constantly told I was too much, I wanted too much, and that my desires for more were wrong. And from a very young age, I can remember resenting him for not being there. And this wasn't just financially. In my heart, the perfect storm began to form, and the resentment bred contempt, disrespect, and ultimately hatred towards my earthly father. And of course, the enemy jumped at the chance to help me birth more lies in my heart, like, I don't need a man. I don't need a father. I'm strong. I can take care of myself. Living in such sin, lies, and strongholds over time will destroy you. Like the scripture in Proverbs 14 states, a tender, tranquil heart will make you healthy, but jealousy can make you sick. One lie gives birth to the next, and so there was definitely jealousy in my heart. My heart was jealous for more. but I didn't know what the more was. So I kept turning to the world's remedies instead of realizing that God wasn't giving me what I wanted, not because I didn't deserve it, but because he knew I ultimately deserved more. If I'm only productive enough, striving, successful, driven, and strong, these were all the thoughts that constantly would fuel me. And this is where I lived for my adult life as a Christian woman. Fast forward to 2011, when those empty lies in my heart would give birth to illness in my body. And as I was told that I had Hodgkin's lymphoma and I started chemo, I was stripped of everything, you guys. Of strength. I could barely walk most weeks because I had such awful neuropathy in my feet. I was stripped of all the striving because I had to rely on other people to take care of me. All productivity, I couldn't even clean my own house. All the doing, all the performing, I was just completely stripped. During treatment, my body was broken down literally by chemo, but what I didn't realize then was God was taking me down to ashes so he could rebuild it all. And one of the greatest areas of rebuilding that occurred was in my mind. All those lies and imaginations I previously listed had to go. And they did, one by one. But as we all know, there is always a root. And no, we did not talk before this, but I thought, she just painted the most beautiful picture of a root system. There is a root to a plant, right? We can have depression, we can have negative thoughts, we can have faulty emotions, but far down below all of those is the ultimate lie, and the others grow out from that. Facing cancer exposed the biggest lie that had been lurking beneath. And to be honest, even sharing this is hard. But if I have faced this, I know other people are facing it. At the root was, I deserve this sickness. God wants me to suffer so I can be used by him. And the biggest, perhaps most potent and effective lie of Satan that I had agreed with was the overwhelming fear that death is after me. Fear of death. What if I die? And again, the enemy twisting it to, God might call you to die, Lindsay, to bring others to Jesus. Just saying that out loud right now. Wow. But when I agreed with fear, I opened the door wide. Dark fears of death, dread, doom, and despair, they all bow to Jesus.
Yeah.
It has taken 8 years for God to rebuild me. 8 years. Hard years. But all the hard was to expose that root, you guys, that I am alive in Christ. That fear has no hold on me. That God offers to me a place of safety, a place of rest beside still waters. I was not living in peace, stillness, rest, or goodness. And God in his love for me took away every device of the enemy to set me free. God didn't give me the cancer. Let me just please say that as loud as I can. God didn't give me the cancer, but he sure fought the battles for me. And as only God can, he also poured out more. See, pain always points to good and more. After chemo, while recovering, I began to sit with God and just worship, and I started to paint and create artwork. It was a time of him rebuilding my mind. I would find time whenever I could to sit and worship at his feet with my creativity. And as I did, my body, mind, and spirit became stronger. It was a secret place with just God. Little did I know God would begin to unfold so much more. During this time, and I was actually homeschooling my kids during this time as well, my husband encouraged me to start sharing my art that I was making in my time with God. And I really have to credit him for all of this, because I really never wanted to share, because it just was, it's your time. It's your time with Jesus. But I did, through his encouragement. And that was 7 years ago. My business has grown rapidly, and I had to stop teaching my kids so I could focus on painting. My art is in galleries all over the United States. Doors I could have never have opened, God has opened. God brought to life a gift that had been dormant inside of me all through cancer. And now as I sell my art, meet clients, and connect with the public in business, which I never thought I would be doing. I wanted to homeschool my kids all the way through. I get to share my story with each person. God's goodness gets to be lifted high. So one of the things that I realized through this journey is that I did not know how to abide in God. I realized that I had never truly known what that looked like. To rest in him, to stop striving, stop performing, proving my worth. My hope, I'm skipping ahead. The dictionary defines the word abide as to remain, continue, stay, to accept or submit to. To abide with God is what we see pictured in John 15, 4-5. So you must remain in life union with me. For as a branch severed from the vine will not bear fruit, so your life will be fruitless unless you live your life intimately joined to mine. I am the sprouting vine, and you're my branches. As you live in union with me as your source, fruitfulness will stream from within you. But when you live separated from me, you are powerless. I realized I was unable to abide in God due to my perception of him. My hope is through my story, many of you can avoid opening the door to all of these lies that I had carried around for years. Are you weary, striving, hurting like I was? Maybe you aren't battling cancer, but you are battling hopelessness, despair, tormenting fear. Jesus is about to touch the dead things in your life, and he's going to bring it back to life. What the enemy meant for evil in my life, God meant for good. He did it for me, and you guys, I am no one special. I was a hot mess, and he reached down and rescued me from myself. Once I fully surrendered it all, my will, rights, all control, all my dreams, my fears, my future, all of it, God was able, finally, to fill me up with his plans that are so much more. I want more, and today, God is pouring it out. So as I close, I really felt led to speak something over you guys. This is something that I'm really doing in my own life, just as I continue to renew my mind. You can call it prophecy. It's kind of just basically saying God's word back to yourself. These are not my words. I borrowed them from Graham Cook, who borrowed them from Jesus. These words are truth, life, and they speak of how the Father truly sees you where you are. So I'm just going to close, and I'm just going to kind of read this aloud over you guys. The place of abiding. The desire for us to be together in relationship and fellowship began with me, says the Lord. Therefore, it can never start with you. It was my dream before creation, woven into your DNA, the desire to know me, the passion to seek me, and the promise of finding me. As your father, my dream was to have a family that I could love outrageously and who would love me in return. A family I could lavish with blessing, show them my ways, and who would live in the confidence of knowing that they were fully, absolutely, and completely loved. When I dreamt of you, I envisioned a child who looked like me. A child who smiled when I smiled, who loved what I loved, who knew they were always welcome in my presence, When Jesus came into your world as a child, living as you and dying as you on the cross, he gave me my heart's desire. He gave me back my family. Every family needs a place to dwell, a place they can live and remain together. Jesus was so delighted to go and prepare that place for you and in you. He was so full of expectation for the Holy Spirit to lead you into the truth of who I am for you and who you are in me. Never underestimate my delight in living in you, or the loving, kind, and gracious way that I connect with the low places of your life experience. I love it that Jesus took away shame and blame, condemnation and humiliation, and how I give you a double portion of whatever joyful thing you need to empower your confidence. Can you hear this truth tonight? Every low place in your life has a double portion of favor, blessing, and provision attached to it. Also, it comes with the joy in me that never ends. I am the initiator of your place of abiding. It isn't a destination to get to or achievement to earn. It's a place of habitation that is already in you. It's Christ in you and you in Christ.
Yes. Man, that's my story.